The Washington Commanders go up north to take on the Philadelphia Eagles. This is your game preview. Let's go. Greetings and salutations. Welcome to Ref the District's game preview for the Washington Commanders up against the Philadelphia Eagles here and week 4. Stoner, it's going to be tough sledding for Washington this weekend. Please give us some hope.
Yeah, I think the hope is who won the last game between the two teams?
Washington.
Okay, there's your hope right there. The last time that Jalen Hurts has lost a regular season game was to
Washington.
Okay, well, there's your hope. It's recency effect. Philadelphia's been really good, but this is the team. Washington is the team, the only team that has basically beaten them in the regular season the last 2 years. There's your hope.
I'm going to give us a little bit more hope on this one, and I'm going to credit Philly fan and fan of our show, Allison, with this as she tipped me off to it a little bit. Eric Bieniemy has experience beating the Philadelphia Eagles.
I like it.
Kansas City Chiefs beat the Philadelphia Eagles in the Super Bowl earlier this year. Now Eric Bieniemy can take that knowledge of that game plan and what they did. Now I get it. Washington doesn't have Patrick Mahomes, doesn't have a Kelsey, right? But Washington does have Eric Bieniemy, and Eric Bieniemy can look into it and see what they can use from that kind of game plan. Because you got to remember, Philadelphia went into that game having broken the season record for sacks on the year. They got zip during the Super Bowl.
So what has been the weakness for Washington this year was the strength in the Super Bowl last year for Eric Bieniemy. So hopefully he can figure something out.
Well, we'll have to see if that is the case here, as we're going to be welcoming up Mike from the Bleav in Eagles podcast here on Ref the District. All right, welcome to the channel here, Mike Gill from the Bleav in Eagles podcast. Mike, appreciate you jumping on here. And of course, we can see that you're also from 97.3 there out in South Jersey. Eagles, big time favorites here as they host the Washington Commanders. Is there any hope for Washington fans that it's closer than the 8-point line?
I would imagine so, yeah. I mean, last year the game was a big spread. It was a home game. It was a primetime game, and Philly just couldn't get off the ground in that game. Washington kind of dominated that night. So, sure, there's hope. And I feel like the Eagles, well, Commanders, football team, and Redskins game the last 4 or 5 years here have been sloppy, messy, ugly games. I mean, down there last year, they got to Wentz 9 times in the game. I mean, they dominated that game. And then Washington came up here and returned the favor. So to answer that, yeah, there's some hope because Washington, Philly, divisional game as always, but it's always been the scrappy game. And up here, guys, I mean, Washington's like, the redheaded stepchild. I mean, you've got the Dallas Eagles thing, which people go crazy for. New York's right up the road, and they have, had some really good, although that's like the hammer and the nail series. The Eagles have just hammered the Giants. They just owned them the last, 10 years or so. And then there's the Washington rivalry, which has kind of just been but Washington has had some interesting moments in these games.
What are you thinking when last year, you talked a little bit about last year with getting to Wentz and all that. What was kind of the Philly feeling of going in there and just beating the crap out of Carson Wentz after he left? Was that a satisfying feeling, or was that kind of
I don't know. You felt bad for him.
Yeah.
I mean, there are a pocket of fans who just don't like the guy, thought that, there was that article that came out when things were going well for him, that he wasn't the easiest guy to get along with, and there was a divide in the locker room and all this stuff. And people didn't want to believe it at first because they liked Wentz. And then when he started to struggle, it was like, oh, maybe that guy who wrote that article, who, by the way, took a lot of crap for that. Like, why would you throw this hit piece out there? And it turns out at the end, it seemed that he was a problem. Indianapolis got rid of him because they thought he was a problem. And you guys felt he was a problem. And I think that there's this portion of people that are like, the heck with that guy. He's the problem, and he can't look at the mirror and see that. But you had to feel bad for him. I mean, he's going against this team that basically when he got drafted, he had a good rookie season, and then he's going to go to the Super Bowl, and he gets hurt, and then they win the Super Bowl without him, and then he never recovered from that. And you almost feel bad for the guy. I just feel like he didn't know how to socially fit in to an NFL locker room and never rebounded from that. And I feel like the injuries just kept piling up on him. He was never the player that he was in 16 and 17, clearly. Sure. But yes, it was satisfying to sack him 9 times.
We got to the bones of it right there. It was satisfying.
The one we actually feel sorry for, because Carson Wentz, last year's news, the one we feel sorry for is Sam Howell, who was sacked 9 times just last week against the Buffalo Bills. Yeah. Philadelphia has an even better defensive front. But, Mike, Eric Bieniemy has some experience beating this Philadelphia defense after winning the Super Bowl earlier this year. Can Eric Bieniemy...
I have a feeling that the Lincoln Financial Field turf will not be an ice skating rink. Just to put that out there.
Already coming up with the excuses, Mike. Already coming up with the excuses. Can Eric Bieniemy, though, kind of take some of that knowledge from the Super Bowl and scheme up a way that Sam Howell is protected back there?
Well, this defense is a little different. John Gannon's not here anymore. Sean Desai is in. They only have 6 sacks this year. I mean, if you look at John Gannon's defense in Arizona right now, they've got like 11. So they're still getting to the quarterback with Gannon's defense. Desai, now Gannon was hated here because he didn't blitz. Eagles fans want you to blitz. They want Jim Johnson. They want Buddy Ryan. They want the body bag game, man. They want guys out. And Gannon did not blitz, and Desai does not blitz. But they get a lot of pressure. Jalen Carter is a major problem. And if your guards and center, that trio in the middle, if they don't have it, they're in for a long day.
It's going to be a long day.
Yeah. It's going to be a long day because we don't have it.
Yes, I figure the interior of that line is an issue. Josh Sweat has been good. Hassan Reddick has not had anything. No sacks, nothing. He's battling this thumb problem, and I think it's been a problem. So it's not the edge that's the issue. It's up the middle, and you don't get a lot of sacks up the middle, but you get a lot of pressure, which causes quick throws, getting off your spot. So I don't think you'll see 9 sacks, but you're going to see a lot of pressure coming from up the middle and not a lot of blitzes, which means Sam Howell's going to get pressure up the middle, and he's going to be throwing into a secondary of green jerseys. I don't know what color they're wearing, but green or white or maybe black. I don't think it's black. They probably would have announced that.
You know, we like to tease folks around here. We like to tease folks in Philly that they owe us maybe a portion of that championship ring for the NFC championship, because we showed the rest of the NFL how to beat Philadelphia, and Philadelphia saw this is how we're going to get beat, and they made all those changes. Brought in Joseph, brought in Sue, then went out and drafted, of course, like you said, Carter. Was that an aberration, or is this who Philly is in terms of stopping the run now as part of their identity on defense?
Well, they draft on the lines. That's why they're so good. Their offensive line is so much better than everybody else's. And you can make an argument. Now, they have A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith and Goddard. Their skill players are very good. But there was times where their skill players were just okay. 2 years ago, they went to the playoffs with basically Jalen Hurts being a unknown. Smith was a rookie. They didn't have any other guy on the other side. Their offensive line led them there. Their star of this team is the offensive line. So they draft offensive line and defensive line. The year that that happened last year, they went out and got Sue, and they went out and got Linval Joseph. You're right. After that game, because they couldn't stop the run, they have so much depth at defensive tackle now. Crazy. Fletcher Cox, Contavious Street could start on a lot of teams. He gets 6 snaps a game. Marlon Tuipulotu played 8 snaps last week. He had a sack. He'd probably be a rotational player on most teams. Milton Williams is a guy who had 4 sacks last year. He only plays like 20% of the snaps. They drafted him in the 4th round. Then you've got Fletcher Cox, who obviously is an all-time great Eagle, having maybe one of his best seasons. Jordan Davis, who was hurt last year in the game against you guys, so you didn't see him. He has been a man-child. And then the guy everybody passed on, Jalen Carter, has just been unblockable. He has 15 quarterback pressures this year, which is second most among defensive tackles. In a third less of the snaps from Javon Hargrave, who was here last year. He has 18 pressures in 127 snaps. That's how good Carter's been. Hargrave was not a good run stopper. Carter, while he gets a lot of pressure, he also stops the run. So they're much better at stopping the run But they do focus on drafting of offensive line and defensive line. I think they were just a little light last year with Davis getting hurt. Fletcher Cox wasn't as good last year, and I don't know, he kind of seemed like he was on the way down. He's been excellent this year, and I think that has to do with managing his snaps. His snap counts are not nearly where they had to be because they have so much depth.
You brought up the skill players, Mike, AJ Brown, Smith, Goddard, who's kind of having a lackluster start to the season. But then you added Swift to the mix at running back. How has he kind of changed this from Miles Sanders?
Wow. And guess what? He wasn't the starter opening night. If you watch that game, Gainwell got all the carries. Swift had 2 touches in the game. So Gainwell was the guy. That's who they were going with. Gainwell got hurt. Swift came in and busted for 175 yards, and then the rest is history. Last week they had 130. Now, they split the carries 16-14 last week. Swift just adds the element of the big play. He hits the hole, breakaway speed. He can catch the ball. They don't throw the ball to the backs all that much. And then last week they used Gainwell to kind of run the clock out in the fourth quarter. He had 8 of his 14 carries were on that last 9-minute drive. But Swift has given them the home run play. And to some extent, Sanders had 1,296 last year. They got to replace 1,200 yards somehow. This kid looks like he can do it. The big problem with him is health. You can't give him the ball 20 times, and that's why Gainwell gets those carries. Put it this way, Rashad Penny averaged 6 yards a carry when he's healthy in Seattle. He'll be inactive, I would likely say, on Sunday if Boston Scott's cleared from his concussion. He was inactive on opening night. He had 3 carries 2 weeks ago, and I don't think he had a touch last week. So a guy who averaged 6 yards a carry in Seattle isn't going to be active in the game. That's how good Swift has been.
Man, Nathan, this is way too much hype here for the Eagles. I mean, we need to change up the mojo a little bit. How many Philly fans are getting arrested at the link on Sunday? We gotta turn the tide a little bit.
Haven't you seen the Eagle fans get a bad rap? I mean, look at the fights going on in San Francisco. There every week I feel like the 49ers are fighting with each other. There was the fight between the Dolphins fan and
the Patriots fan.
And they played Denver last week. The girls were fighting.
That one.
Yeah, the last night the guy poured the beer all over Amon-Ra St. Brown in that game. I mean, fan behavior is getting out of control. Yes, Philly gets it, but haven't you guys seen? There's a new Philly fan, man. Trey Turner comes up the bat, and the place gave him a standing ovation. On my show, we have hashtag retire the boo, man. It's all peace and love here in Philly now. Brotherly love is real.
Brotherly love is real.
He's good at deflecting, man.
He is. That was about as good as those snowballs being thrown at Santa Claus there. You brought up the brotherly love. How about the brotherly shove? That's getting a lot of play this week as far as a point of discussion. Obviously, as a Philly guy, you got to be all for the brotherly shove, which, by the way, is an excellent name. Jack Del Rio talked about it, saying it's a good rugby play, shouldn't be a football play. Just how much of that is just Jalen Hurts being good at what he does and the offensive coordinator obviously calling a good little, shove play there?
Yeah, I mean, whatever the genesis of the play is, whoever said, hey, let's try this, give that guy credit. I agree with Del Rio. It's not an aesthetically pleasing play. It seemingly should be illegal to be able to physically just push a guy forward. But I got news for teams. Why don't you try it? How about trying the play? But a lot of it is Hurts squats 600 pounds. He gets a ton of push from his legs. And then the guys behind him pushing forward, not to mention Landon Dickerson, Jason Kelsey, Jordan Mailata, Lane Johnson, and Cam Jurgens, by the way, who they drafted to replace Kelsey, is starting at guard. He's been excellent at right guard. So much so. They drafted Landon Dickerson to replace Kelsey. Kelsey stayed, and they moved Dickerson to left guard. He was so good at left guard, they drafted Jurgens to replace Kelsey. Kelsey stayed again, and they moved Jurgens to right guard. And now they're not sure whether or not they want to move Jurgens because he's been so good. But that push that they get, I don't know why anybody else doesn't try it. You can complain about all you want. It's a legal play. You might say it shouldn't be. And if you told me they outlawed it, I wouldn't be like, oh, that was stupid. It's not an aesthetically pleasing play, but until it's gone, do it.
Yeah.
Try it. See if it works. And do it really well. Last week, somebody stopped it on 3rd down, and then they did it on 4th down and got it.
I happen to agree with you, Mike. I think as long as it's it's legal. I don't know why other teams don't try it, but the
Well,
Eagles do it very successfully.
Did you watch the Eagles game last week? Aikman said it. He says, I don't know why the Buccaneers don't try it right here. They were on the goal line. They're spread out. They are in a shotgun. And Aikman said, why not get Mayfield under center and push him forward? Like,
Sure.
do it. I don't get it.
Why don't you put Daron Payne for Washington? Put him under center and just have snapping the ball under center and just push forward. He's your strongest guy.
Washington, Logan Thomas, he played some quarterback, right?
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Everybody has a player that at some part of in their past had probably played quarterback other than the actual quarterback.
Mhm.
There's been teams that said, why not put a running back under there? Do something like that. I just don't understand why anybody else says, look, it's a 1 yard or they do it with like a yard and a half, and they just push the pile forward. If you have trust in your offensive line, most teams don't. That's their problem. They don't have a good enough interior. Philadelphia does.
Well, let me ask you, Mike, you've talked a lot about Philadelphia and all the positives on both sides of the ball. What do you guys think of Sam Howell and his chances here in Washington to be quarterback of the future?
I actually, I do a segment on my radio show called Who's In, Who's Out, where I try to pick who's going to make the playoffs each week based on, it's so hard. Every week you're like, trying to find 3 wildcard teams in the NFC is impossible. I actually liked Washington because I liked their roster. Their problem has been the quarterback over the years. Howell was a guy that I think the common football fan didn't realize. There was a time where if you look at the way too early mock drafts, he was the number 1 pick in some of those way too early mock drafts.
Sure.
The North Carolina team wasn't very good, and he did not have a great season. But he had a lot of talent to where people thought he could have been not only the number 1, a first-round pick, the number 1 pick. So I liked him from a talent standpoint. And getting Bieniemy there, I thought that might add something here. But their problem, again, is they got weapons. They've got skill players. Their line stinks. And until they get that figured out, their defense – look, this who's in, who's out thing, they keep making me look bad because I like teams that play good defense. They won that division a couple of years ago because their defense was so good. And they've added so many high draft picks to that defense, and it's gotten worse. So I don't understand how the defense has gotten worse. I think they may have found a guy they can at least give the year to evaluate, but until that line gets figured out, you're not going to be able to fairly evaluate him. That's my thought.
That's fair.
So outside of the field being slick, is there a way that Washington could exploit and beat this Jalen Hurts led Philadelphia team? Jalen Hurts is 20-1 in his last 21 regular season starts. So nigh unbeatable.
Yeah, the loss was to Washington. And that's a night where they didn't protect him that well. They had weird things happen. Watkins had that catch and then he fumbled it. Yeah. This is a team that it's really hard. I mean, every week we say, all right, Bill Belichick, week 1, he likes to take out the other team's best player and then say, figure it out. Well, who do you take out? You're going to take A.J. Brown out? Great, we'll throw it to Smith. You take Smith out? Great, we'll throw it to Brown. You're going to try to bracket both those guys? You got Goddard. You want to take the pass game away? They'll run the ball. They have the best offensive line in football. It's hard to get pressure on them. Hurts hasn't even run a lot this year. They don't need him to. They hand the ball off. They take off. So it is a pick your poison. But the one thing that teams have tried to do is they have basically tried to take the pass game away. The Eagles have run the ball 40. They have run the ball 88 times the last 2 weeks. 88 times. There's about 20 teams in this league who haven't run the ball 88 times all year yet. So if Washington says, hey, we're going to make Jalen Hurts try to beat us, can they stop the run? Yeah. They got blitzed last week by Buffalo trying to stop the run. They didn't do a good job. And Buffalo, it's not a very good rushing attack. They don't try to run the ball at all, but they saw something last week that they tried. So I think Washington, if they take the passing, they do have a good pass rush. They do have the ability to give Philly problems there, but I just don't think they can stop the run. And I think Philly is so disciplined. They say, we'll run it 40 times if we have to. And here's another thing. The fans like when they run the ball. There's not a lot of they want them to run. They love that identity. So it's worked.
All right. We would love for Washington to run the ball, but they just don't seem to like that, especially with Eric Bieniemy as offensive coordinator, which, to be fair, if that's his identity, go with the identity, but it might be a long night for Sam Howell, or long day for Sam Howell and the Washington Commanders. Mike, what's your final score prediction for Sunday?
All these games have been close. I mean, 25-11, which was a scoregami, by the way. The Eagles making history there. 25-11 last week. The game against New England in week 1 was not an aesthetically pleasing game. Even the Minnesota game, they won. They were up big, like 28-7. Minnesota kind of came back and made it close. I just don't see a huge, like 35-7 or something like that, but I think it's 28-10, 28-17, something like that, but 28-3, and then Washington kind of – the problem becomes Philly's defense will let you stay on the field all day. They'll give you yards up and down. Their philosophy is you can have a 9, 10, 11, 12-play drive, but you're going to have to do it 3, 4, 5 times in a game, and their philosophy is if you're going to have a 9, 10, 11-play, 12 drive, what's going to happen? Penalty, fumble, interception, sack. Somewhere in that 12 play, there's going to be negative plays. And if you don't get 6 on that 12-play drive and you only end up with 3, you're going to have to go on another 12-play drive. And that's the problem that teams have against the Eagles because they run the ball, they kill the clock, which means if you're killing the clock too. Tampa Bay had 1 possession in the fourth quarter last week. Philadelphia ran the final 9 minutes of the game out. And there's the problem. So 24-7, maybe Washington gets a late score, but Philly covers.
Oh, geez. Should we even show up, Nathan? Should we call him and just say, just forfeit the game?
We had a listener, Mike, who just said, just sit like these 4 players and just give up this game. You do the NBA thing where you rest your starters just to kind of like work on Chicago. This game against the Eagles, not winnable. Just focus on the Chicago game that is winnable. It definitely sounds like, Mike, it's going to be a runaway for Philadelphia. Little weaknesses coming from the Philly side. So we'll have to see how this turns out as Washington Commanders go up to Philadelphia to take on the Eagles this Sunday. We appreciate Mike here from the Bleav in Eagles podcast joining us here on Ref the District. And until next time,
it's just forfeit.
Be a fan.